Welcome to the Knife Effect, Episode 1. My name is Tom. This is a format I'm trying out, inspired some of the great knife and gear podcasts out there, and I'm just going to see how it goes and evaluate it, see how many more I'll do in the future. On that note, I'd also like to open up to any YouTubers or Instagrammers out there that want to be kind of a part of this, be on this, and just kind of talk about knives and gear. I actually already had one person through Instagram reach out to me and said he is interested. Christian, you might know him as Nuts for Knives on Instagram or Nuts Knife Reviews on YouTube. But if anyone else wants to maybe be a part of this and talk about knives and gears, you can find me at leftycutlery@gmail.com. Be definitely the best way to dialogue, but you can also find me on Instagram at leftycutlery if you want to message me there. Or you can always leave a comment on YouTube, but it is definitely a lot more difficult to communicate on YouTube. So I'm going to start out, this episode is just going to be me today, but I'm going to start out by telling you what I carried today, and hopefully post some pictures of that carry too as well, if you're watching this instead of just listening to it. So what did I carry? Well, I did typically what I usually do, which is carry some modern, some traditional, and a flashlight, and a multi-tool, and now I've been including a pen. So start out with my modern knife. I have a zero tolerance 0770 carbon fiber. This is that one that kind of looks like the 777, but it was the one that they put in the production line. It has a liner lock with carbon fiber handles. It's a medium-sized EDC type knife. I really like it, and since I never was able to find one of those 777s, or didn't really want to spend the money on trying to buy something so expensive, I went with the 770 CF. And yeah, it's assisted opening instead of ball bearings, but it's still nice. So that was my modern knife that I carried. I usually complement that with a traditional, and the traditional I carried today was a Northwoods Knives Hawthorne Jack, and that is in a grayish giraffe bone. And I actually picked this up on the most recent Northwood Knives runs of the Hawthorne Jacks that Knife Ship Free put out. It's on the number 48 pattern by GEC. I carried a Victorinox Cadet, which I almost always do. Actually, on a side note there, with the Hawthorne Jack, I have it in a Collector Knives pocket slip, which is actually my preferred pocket slip. I actually prefer them over the Northwoods, I don't remember or it's a Knife Ship Free slip. I think it's the name is escaping me right now. But I do like the Collector Knives ones. Are a little bit slimmer, a little bit easier to carry in pocket. The Northwoods that Derek puts out are also very good for their pocket slips, but I just prefer the Collector Knives ones. As always, I carry a Victorinox Cadet, whether work or just every day. I have a Victorinox Cadet, and I have a variety of cadets, so I kind of change those out. Today I have the Victorinox Cadet that's in a gunmetal bluish. It's the 2015 limited edition Victorinox Cadet, and I have that in a pocket slip as well. It's from Hitchin Timber, and I've done a video before on their products. They make the leather slips for Victorinox knives, and I think some Buck 110 and the models that are similar to the 110. This pocket slip actually has a loop on the side, material, the flexible material, and I carried that is where I put my pen as well. It's actually designed for Fisher Space Pen, but I put a Kaweco Lilliput, which is a pen that looks very similar in size to a Fisher Space Pen, but it's actually a fountain pen from Kaweco, and I really like it. I looked up some reviews on it. I'm not really huge into fountain pens, but this one is pretty cool, and even though this was designed to accept the Fisher Space Pen, they are very similar in size, so you can actually put a Kaweco Lilliput if you want to, if you're not really into the cartridge that the Fisher Space Pen comes with. And then I also had a flashlight with me, and that would be a 4.7's Preon 2, and this is one of the newer models of the Preon 2 with the milling in the handle. This one's in a blue anodized color. I really like the double triple A's flashlights because they're pretty slim. They're almost like, just the size of a medium-sized pen or something. So it fits really well in the pocket. I've never done a video on this, but the wallet I have, which I've actually had for I think over a year now, is actually a Spec Ops wallet, and it's relatively thin. It fits your credit cards and not a lot of cash, but if you don't carry a lot of cash, you'll be fine. But it actually has a window in each side when it's folded up. It's a bifold. And what I like about that is that I can have my ID displayed at all times. I don't have to necessarily take it out if I need to. So that's what I carried today. It's kind of a normal carry where I usually almost always have a Victorinox Cadet. I usually have one traditional knife, one modern knife, and a flashlight. And the pen is something I've been incorporating recently into the EDC. So that's been pretty neat because it's nice to have a better pen when you have to go sign something than what they usually provide you at either at a restaurant or a bank or anything like that. It's nice to have. And if you follow me on Instagram, you realize I post a lot of pictures of traditional knives, and that's not the only thing I'm usually carrying that day. That's just I find the traditional knives very interesting. And so segueing into that, first thing I'd like to talk about is GEC, Great Eastern Cutlery. And so we're going to talk about kind of what's going on in Great Eastern Cutlery currently. If you have been following them, you realize that they finished up recently the number 13s, which they had several different issues, several different versions of, and then they also had a run of the 71 bullnose sod busters, which they've had many times in the past. So it's just re-release of that, but they're in the 1095 steel instead of the 01 that they used to do. For me, I picked up a number 13 Whittler and a rust red jig bone and a number 13 Clerk in Gabon ebony. I'm not as big of a fan as I thought I would be with the 13 Whittler. I actually prefer the 38 Whittler that Great Eastern has, and I have a few of those, and I think that maybe eventually I'll be getting rid of the number 13 Whittler because it just doesn't appeal to me as much. It is well constructed and is really nice because it's a split back Whittler from GEC, but hey, it just kind of isn't for me. I also did pick up two 71 bull noses. I have one in OD green linen micarta and a one in red linen micarta that I had to buy in the secondary market because those were very hard to make, and honestly I'm pretty impressed, very hard to find. I'm honestly very impressed by the build quality of these 71s because that's basically the cheapest GEC you can find out there, but they're still built like a tank. And these things, the way the sod buster is, you really feel like you can go to town and get some work done with this sod buster. Not that I probably would because I don't usually put my traditionals into any kind of hard use. I don't really have a lot of times that I would put a knife into hard use where I am. Currently in production here, we're also looking at the 48s, most of the single blade 48s, the Weasels, which was a single blade muskrat clip. They've mostly been released. And I did pick up a 48 and muskrat clip Weasel and the blueberry jig bone, which was actually pretty hard to find because I looked on one site, had it in my cart, and in the time I took trying to check out, I was actually out and about when I saw it, so I put it in the cart and said, hey, okay, I'll put it in the cart, and then when I have time, like in a few minutes, I'll go and check out and put all my credit card information in. And in like the matter of probably 7 minutes or so, maybe even less than that, 5 minutes, it actually alerted me that the item was gone from my cart and that item was sold out. So I did eventually find one up for sale and snatch it up pretty quick. And I must say the blueberry jig bone is really attractive actually on the knife, and I really like it. There's an SFO from Charlie Campagna for the number 48, which is it's called the Diamond Jack, and I was not able to get on the list for that. Those went up pretty quick for the early reserves on collector knives, and yeah, it does look pretty cool. The jigging pattern kind of reminds me of the GEC rope knife jigging pattern. It's not a very uniform jigging pattern, almost like a natural jigging pattern, so it looks pretty cool. So I'm not sure if I'll try to get one of those in secondary market or not, but they do look pretty neat. I'm waiting right now on a number 48 improved trapper, and that's going to be in bloodwood. I've definitely enjoyed seeing all these bloodwood knives that I have, and I think that it's a pretty nice wood to have for a cover material in GEC or any kind of traditional, but just looks really great. And I'm getting it in the improved trapper version, which means it's going to have a muskrat clip and a Warren clip, and they're going to be, I think it's probably about this. I think they're about the same size. It's double bladed, but it's basically having like two main blades. Of course, earlier in my EDC, I mentioned I did pick up the Northwoods Hawthorne Jack in the most recent run, which is also built on the number 48 frame. GEC is also in there, currently in production or coming soon. They're going to have a run of the 54 Big Jack, and there's a few SFOs out there. It's a little bit larger for a traditional knife. I'm not sure if I'll pick one up because it's a little bit larger and kind of trying to avoid buying every pattern that GEC releases. There's also an upcoming single blade of the 38, which is basically looks like a Gringling Whittler without the, well, split back Whittler. So you're going to have just the clip main and no secondary blades. I might pick up one of those. I'm looking at maybe one in the Bacote wood, so we'll see. And then also they are planning to make a number 35 in a farm and field model, which I think is going to have like a Warren cliff, and then it's like a one-arm man blade. I think it's the one that you can kind of wave out of the pocket or like put on the pocket and open up a, yeah, they call it the one-arm man blade because if you only had one arm, you could put it up against the fabric of your pocket and open it up. But yeah, that's going to be in the farm and field trim. If you remember the 35, when it came out, it had a Blade Forms SFO, which I actually have one, and then they also had one that was in a Gabon Ebony, and that one was a harness jack, so it had a spear main blade and a punch. So it's interesting that for the next 35 they're actually introducing another farm and field one. So those will be with probably linen micarta or different types of micarta covers, and also probably Delrin. So moving on to other news, I'm going to talk about a knife campaign that I've actually been waiting on for a while. And I don't know how many people know about this or not, but this was from a knife designer or a knife maker. He doesn't own his own company. The whole knife thing is really a side gig for him, really more of a hobby. But if you know who Brian Evans is, he is Brian Evans of Evans Knife and Tool. He designed a knife called the Companion, which is a medium-sized EDC type fixed blade, which actually is a really cool profile. And I remember when I first saw it, I really wanted one, but there wasn't any runs going on. And you could buy them on the secondary market for higher prices. And Cutlery Lover on YouTube had videos on it. And it's just a really cool looking knife. And Brian Evans has done runs of the Companion before, and they have done well. And all the runs before were actually, I believe, produced in China. So he had outsourced overseas to make the knives, and then he had them shipped back here and given to customers. I think those were in S35VN or S30V. But back last year, beginning of the year, I think it was the spring of 2016, he launched an Indiegogo campaign saying that although he said he wasn't going to do any more knife runs, he decided to bring back the Companion for another run if he could raise the funds on Indiegogo. And for a while, the funds were about like halfway funded, and towards the end of the campaign, thanks a lot to probably Cutlery Lover in his advertisement of the Companion, he surpassed his goal. And so he was very happy about that. And once he got the funds, he talked to a company about making the blades. He, I think, ran into some frustrations with that originally, and then he decided to talk to Bark River Knives about making the Companion for him. Because although he's a knife designer and he calls himself a knife maker, he doesn't actually have the shop to make 200 knives. And so he talked to Bark River Knives and put a deposit in there with Mike Stewart at Bark River Knives to make the companion. And if you follow the thread on Blade Forums, you'll realize that that has not happened. There's been a lot of frustration on his end. There's been a lot of frustration with his contributors to this project, and ultimately he decided he was going to get out of that and tell Mike Stewart he no longer wanted them to produce the knives. So as of the recording of this, which is April 11th, he last updated April 1st of 2017, saying that he was going to talk to Mike Stewart about taking that away and going to someone else. He did not mention who to make the blades. It'd still be in the U.S. And I think they were supposed to start right away on production of those knives, which is good because we've been waiting around for a while. And there's been a lot of people dropping out of this. And I'm going to put a link to the Blade Forums thread on that he currently has for the Evans Knife and Tool, because he did mention that with so many people asking for refunds on the companion for this run, he might actually have to pull the project, because although his knives were very popular, he needs to have a certain amount that he can give them without going into debt himself in order to make these knives. But yeah, these knives are pretty cool. If you haven't ever seen one, he had an Evans Knife and Tool companion, and he's doing it in CPM 20 CV, which is a great steal. And like, these are under $200, so you get CPM 20 CV, you get like a 2.75 inch cutting length, so it's a good size, and then he has a variety of different handle choices. There's like different G10s, including a JG10 carbon fiber, and they all come with a Kydex sheath. I think he had a few other options as well. And the handle scales are actually removable on these knives. I believe they're still going to be removable on this run. They were in the past, and you can actually have multiple handle scales and swap them out. So yeah, he is hoping that some people will like to help as well, and try to get more people on board for that. So if you're interested, I'll put the link of that thread on Blade Forums on there, so you can take a look and contact Brian if you are interested. And yeah, it is frustrating, and I know a lot of people have complained, but you have to remember, this guy does have a day job. He's not a custom knife maker making all of his income off of making blades. This is something he did on the side, and something that he did mainly because people requested, they really wanted more companions, even though the last time he did a run he said that was it. And honestly, this might be it for him because of how much stress this time has gone. On a side note there, a lot of people complained about the fact that Bark River Knives didn't really help him out, and that he gave them money and they didn't make his knives. And in some ways I understand, some ways I don't. You have to remember, Bark River Knives are their own company, and they have an amount of knives that they need to produce in order to satisfy their customers. So looking at that, like, yeah, it would be nice if Bark River Knives would have made sure they got his knives done and started and produced in the timeline that they said they would, which they didn't. But I understand in the sense that at the same time, you have this guy who is asking for about 200 knives, who isn't associated with the company, who, although is giving you money, it's not your bread and butter knives that the company is producing on their own. So I do have a few Bark River knives, and I'm not going to stop buying Bark River knives just because of this. I'm a little disappointed that it didn't happen through Bark River, and that we're still waiting on the companion. But I think that the wait will be worth it based on what I've seen with the companion in the past on other YouTube videos. So if you want to, definitely contact Brian Evans at Evans Knife and Tool. So let's talk about some knives that I'm looking forward to getting. I actually just got the Kershaw Pub, which is a Dmitry Sinkovich design. And actually, this is a pretty cool knife. I wasn't sure how I was going to like it at first. It's actually kind of a keychain knife, where it's almost like a carabiner knife. So there's no lock in it. You can kind of hear the detent here through the microphone. So there is a little detent ball, there's no lock. But when you have it closed, the detent keeps it closed, and when you have it open, the detent allows for enough pressure that's not going to just fold on you right away, that you still have to break a little bit of a detent. It has an aluminum scale on one side, and then it's all, I believe, stainless steel on the other side. And this one's in black aluminum. They have one that's coming out in blue aluminum, and they also have a carbon fiber. I decided to pick one up. When you open up the knife, you can attach it to a carabiner or your keys or whatnot. I'm going to try carrying it on my keys and see what I think. But it actually is relatively smooth, and one of the cool things is it actually does have one phosphor bronze washer in the pivot, so it actually does allow for it to open and close pretty easily, which is pretty nice, and it has a little standoff on the end. And you can also open up bottles, and it has a little kind of flathead. I guess you could use it as a flathead screwdriver or pry bar. I wouldn't do much prying with this thing, but it's pretty cool. The blade is kind of a sheep's foot. Yeah, you don't have much of a tip on that, but it's a neat little blade. I'm going to test it out, see how it is on my keys. It seems a little bit heavy, so I'm not sure how long I'll carry it with my keys, but it is a neat little design if you want to have something that is a small knife that won't take up much space, or you can just put on your keys. This is definitely a design to consider. I think this will also be a great gift for people because it is, I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it wasn't a lot. It was definitely under $30. But it will make a good gift for people. And it would be cool if this one is something you could consider as a TSA compliant knife. I know that some time ago they talked about the idea of allowing certain knives on airplanes, and then Spyderco designed a Rhodey as a response to what they were considering in the TSA guidelines. This, I think, might still fit in that design of what they originally proposed, but yeah, they've gone back on that and said still no knives in airplanes. But it'd be cool if you could have something like this, because yeah, it doesn't have a sharp tip, not a very big blade, and it's a non-locking blade, so it'd be cool to see if one day maybe you could actually carry something like this on a plane, because really the only way you can get around it is checking the knives in your bag. And that's what I actually did a few years ago when I went to Florida, because I didn't want to be without a knife when I was out of town. As far as other knives, I'm actually also waiting on a line steel TRE, and this is going to be the TRE with the G10 handles, not the typical TRE, which is the rapid exchange with the flipper tab that's removable and the thumb plate that's removable. There's a few other Kershaws I'm waiting on. Waiting on the Kershaw Induction, which I think we've all been waiting on for quite a while now since it was announced. I think it was over a year ago now. I think they had some problems with manufacturing, but that's the Grant and Gavin Hawk design with the Hawk lock, and it looks really cool. I think the only video of it, other than from SHOT Show out there, is one from Everyday Commentary when he got a sample model in, and that was a while ago. I'm also, of course, waiting on the Kershaw Natrix, which is pretty cool where they named it the Natrix. But yeah, it looks very similar to their 777 design, but it's a budget version. But I'm just, it's a lot cheaper than my zero tolerance 0770. But I'm curious to check it out because it is a pretty cool design, and the fact that they're making it where it's going to be, I think it's like only $40-$50, so it'll be pretty cool. I mean, it's gonna have the HCR13 MOV steel, but it's cool to have a design that, hey, normally you couldn't get because there was only so many of these that existed. I'm also waiting on the Kershaw Deadline, which I believe is a matte disc-in design. That's going to have KVT. I'm really happy to see that Kershaw has listened and put some KVT in their budget line. I recently had a video out on the Kershaw Fraction, which is a Jens Anzo design, and I'm really satisfied with that because it's got the flipping action that is almost just as good as my 0450 from Zero Tolerance. So it's really cool that they've been doing that. I'm also waiting on, hopefully soon, they'll be releasing the Lion Steel SR11, which if you looked on SHOT Show, it's actually very similar to the old Lion Steel SR1 and SR2, which is a single piece of aluminum handle, but instead of thumb studs, they're actually making it a flipper this time, and I think they're putting ball bearings in it instead of washers. So it should be pretty cool because it's going to be an integral uh, aluminum, and also they have a titanium version. I'll probably go for the aluminum version, and the fact that it's going to be a flipper and have bearings will be pretty cool because I really like the SR2 that I have. I have an SR2 that I really like. I think it's going to be Sleipner steel too, so we're not doing any more D2, which I did with the SR1. But I think it'll be great because Lion Steel does some good work, and the integrals they make are pretty cool. The fact that it's one single piece of metal that the handle is. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to the Lion Steel Roundhead Euro Barlow. And I have one on reserve with collector knives. That's going to be a traditional knife, but it actually has some modern materials. So we're looking at a traditional knife with, they're going to have different covers like cocobolo and I think a few other woods as well. So it's going to have traditional construction per se and traditional materials, but we're also going to have titanium bolsters, and we're going to have an M390 blade. And also the screw, instead of being a pin knife like most traditionals like GECs or Case or Queens are, there will actually be screws in it. So I believe you could take this one apart. But it looks pretty cool, and it's neat that you can get a knife that's going to have M390 as a traditional knife. And currently, it's like you can go to Queen, and I think they have some 154 CM blades. But M390 is a great steel, and it's pretty cool to see that Lion Steel is trying this out. So I'm definitely excited to see that, and I think the prices were under $100 or around $100 that they were quoting for what they think the Euro Barlow is going to come in. So that's pretty cool. One last thing I would say is, this is not new news by any means. April 6th, I think Spyderco made an announcement to the public, and this is pretty much in response to its customers. There was videos out there with the Apostle P and also Nick Shabazz complaining, and there's probably other ones, but those are the ones I know of, complaining about the problems with Spyderco. And a few of those were the fact that disassembling the knife voids Spyderco's warranty, and if you want to maintain your knife and you want to take it apart, or even stuff like the Apostle P does, like sharpening knives, he usually takes apart the knife when he does that. And Spyderco had a policy saying that it voids your warranty if you take apart the knife, and that's kind of disappointing for a company that makes good knives not to back their product in that way. They were also using red Loctite in their knives, in the U.S. at least. And if you're not familiar with that, red Loctite it's a type of thread locker, and they typically, a lot of people use blue Loctite, which is not permanent Loctite. You can actually remove that, but it does help keep the screws from coming off, or the pivot if you don't want the pivot to spin around. But red Loctite is more of a permanent thread locker. It's not recommended for using on your knife parts unless you don't ever want that knife to come apart. So it's kind of disappointing that they put red Loctite in their knives, because it was basically saying, hey, you're not going to take this knife apart. There's ways around it. You can heat up the knife with like a hair dryer or a heat gun and to loosen the thread locker, but that's not ideal. So April 6th, Spyderco made an announcement that disassembling the knife no longer voids the warranty as long as you don't mess up the knife, like you destroy the knife. But disassembling the knife per se does not actually void the warranty, which is good. You can actually maintain your knife the way you want. They also said they're gonna no longer use the red Loctite in their USA made knives, which is also good. So it's a great thing to see that Spyderco listened to their fans. They listened to the people who complained on YouTube. They listened to the people who most likely were complaining in the forums and whatnot. But that's something to say, that the company responded to the public and what they said and what they complained about, and realized that, hey, if you want to keep these customers with their brand, they'll make changes that make sense. And if they have a quality product, they should be able to back it in the fact that they know that most people, if they disassemble a knife, are not going to mess it up into the point where it destroys a knife. And to have a warranty like that makes no sense. And yeah, I think that's about it. That's all I have for now, and like that's why I'm definitely reaching out there to see if anybody else has anything they want to talk about on this. Because hey, I'm gonna run out of topics quick. I really like knives, I really like gear, but there's only so much I myself can talk about without having other people discuss. So yeah, hopefully next time we might have Christian from Nuts for Knives on here, and I'm really excited about that because he absolutely seems to love traditionals. And he's been to the Great Eastern Cutlery factory. I think he's spoken to some people from Great Eastern. I think he might have even spoken to Charlie Companion. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So hopefully I can get him on next time I do this. I'm not sure next time when I will do this or how frequently I'll do this, but it'll be cool to have a guest host or a guest on this podcast. And definitely, if anyone else is interested in talking about gear and knives, definitely reach out to me again. So I can be found at Lefty Cutlery on Instagram, YouTube. Well, this is on YouTube, so Lefty Cutlery on YouTube. And of course, if you want to email me, it is leftycutlery@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and feel free to ask any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.